So those days, only the leaders and what we call as top people in the top. Those days, 1,500 years ago, only those people that are in the higher ranking that can consume cocoa, right? So botanically, cacao family is under Malvaceae. So which plants that under this family is cotton, right? And hibiscus and yeah, lady's finger. All right. So within the family, all right, the genus is Theobroma, all right, and the species is cacao. So they have cousins, 22 cousins. So if you can see here, so this is Theobroma cacao. That's the source of your chocolates, right? And these are the cousins, right? And we have another different type of species as well, but these are among that known, right? Theobroma grandiflorum and bicolors. Only Theobroma cacao that can produce the flavored chocolates, but not the others. But grandiflorum and bicolors, they are known for they have this thick pulps that people can use either for drinks and as well for juice and ice creams. All right. So you might heard about uh, cacao or cocoa, right? Which one is which? Which one should I use? Well, basically in general we can use cocoa, all right. But some experts call cacao are the raw materials, the tree of cacao, right? The beans. But then after it's been fermented and produced to semi finished products and products, then we call it cocoa, including the flavor. We call it cocoa flavor. All right. Okay. I hope that can help us in the next explanations. Yeah. All right. Many of us know chocolate. We eat chocolate, but those days, this way back, that chocolate is was consumed as a drink. All right, they call it Jakarta, right? Means bitter water. So you have your punya raw cocoa beans, right? Of course, this is a dried one, raw cocoa beans. So these people, the Mayans people, they mix cocoa bean roll with chili, with cinnamon, and some spices, herbs. So they mix it together with water and then make it like a froth and drink it. Oh, they like it. Like it's very invigorating, right? So cocoa those days been not only been consumed, but some historians says that it will been used as currencies. Right nowadays, we use currencies, our money that we have, where those days people are use food as currencies. Right? At least some historians says that if they don't have money to buy something, they can eat the money they have. Right? Very interesting. So a bit of introductions. History of cacao. It is originated here around Amazon's basins here and brought by some of the cocoa brought and cultivated by the Mayan and Aztec, right? Way long ago, right? They've been cultivated there, all right? And then 1,500 years ago, Spain, right? Hernandez Cortez, right? Inquisidor came to this place, right? And met Montezuma. Montezuma was the king there, and well, and brought back cocoa to Spain, right? And the Spanish will like it very much, right? And they kept the secrets about like 100 years in Spain before the other countries knows that there is a wonderful, food and drinks that they have, as we call now as chocolates, all right? Then after Spain, it spread into England and then of course to the America, yeah, right. So some important landmarks here. You can see that the chocolate itself is nothing new. It's we've been in so far means that it's very old history. It's around 18,000 there. You can see Van Houten is the one who uh, initially extracted cocoa butters, all right? And then in 1847, a company called Fry made the first chocolate bar, yeah, company right now. I think they are in with the under the company of Cadbury, and until 1905, Cadbury developed dairy milk that we like it very much. In 1907, many of you probably like Kisses, right? That small chocolate, yeah, been developed by Hershey. So you see that it's a very old histories about chocolates, right? So where are the chocolate means that cocoa producing countries nowadays, right? So it started here, right, in Amazon basin in Central America, but now you can see that they are planted most in tropical countries, right, including our country Malaysia and our neighbors Vietnam and Philippines and of course Indonesia. 70% of the productions of cocoas are from country like uh, Cote d'Ivoire. That's the country that produces a lot of cocoa, right? And also Ghana, and also including Indonesia. Right? 70% are coming from them, right? Okay. So, what is chocolate by definitions? Right. So, according to this, right. So, chocolate is a semi-solid. It's a semi-solid, right? You hold sometimes it melts, right? Semi-solid suspensions of a mixtures of sugar, cocoa, all right, and probably milk if it's a milk chocolate, all right, in a continuous phase of cocoa butter, right? So you need to have cocoa butter, you need to have sugar, and then some cocoa mass, and then perhaps milk, for you can make a chocolate. So they are really known chocolates. There are three types of known chocolates, which are, I'm sorry, all right, milk chocolates, dark chocolate, and white chocolate, right? So dark chocolate, you don't add milk. If you had milk, then you have milk chocolate. But how about this white chocolate? Huh? It is called chocolate, but unfortunately, technically, it is not chocolate because it doesn't contain cocoa mass. It only contain cocoa butter and perhaps sugar and perhaps some vanilla. All right. So these are the three types of chocolate that we are known. But in 2018, all right, there's a new chocolate, what we call it as ruby chocolates. Right. You can see that the colors are like pink colors. So these colors are original, they are not edited. So somehow in the process and how they ferment the beans, later on we'll talk about that. So they come out with ruby chocolate, which is a new type of chocolate. So now we have actually four types of chocolate, including the new one, ruby chocolates. All right. Oh, right. So when we eat chocolate, so basically we are consuming a lot of chemical inside that sometimes benefits or sometimes we can call it as giving some pleasures when we eat chocolate. When we eat chocolate, the first thing that perhaps come is the happy feelings, all right. So that comes from what we call as phenylethylamines, right, that give you the pleasure effects, right, and some stimulants, all right, also inside chocolate, such as caffeine. But caffeine is very the amount is small, but there's a lot of theobromines. Okay, some theophylline as well. So theobromine and theophylline are derivative from caffeine, and we know caffeine in lots of in coffee that give you like a or feeling of that when you drink coffee, right? So in chocolate and less caffeine, but lots of theobromines with a mild effect, right? And of course, there's a lot of polyphenols, right? Antioxidants that can prevent the oxidations of low density lipoproteins or LDL, or we call it a bad cholesterol, right? All right. So let's see. We know a bit about our cocoa, all right? So this is the tree of cocoa. All right, you can see the fruits are all over the branches and the stems here. All right, so we see a look at the growing conditions. They're like a warm temperatures. All right, 18 is a bit cold, but it's around 18 to 32. Right, they need a lot of rainfall. They can be as high as 600 meters of elevation. We want to cultivate. You need to have a soil that is well drained. You cannot plant there where it's mostly clayey, that they contain water. No, they don't like that. So with a pH of 5 to 7.5, and as well, it's an understory trees, right? They need some shade around 40 to 15%. And also they are very sensitive to sun and wind. So you can see if you look at the growing conditions, well, Malaysia is one of the countries that can provide a good place for cocoa, right? So these are the growing conditions. All right. So let's see now. That's the pot of cocoa. This is what we call as fruit of cocoa, right? The fruits, right? Usually we call it a pot. So the pot looks like a rugby ball here, and they have different colors, right? Either greens or reddish like this, right? And the colors are from the anthocyanins, right? So in mature, they have green or red, sometimes purplish, right? And they mature, they becomes yellow and orange, right? Or red or purple a bit, right? So I put here cacao pot is non-climacteric and indehiscence. So non-climacteric means that that if you have banana, if they haven't ripe on the trees, so you take out and then they still can ripe even though you harvest before their ripening stage. But cocoa is not. We have this type of fruits whereby you harvest it before it's still not ripe, okay, but it won't ripe. So this is what we call is non-climacteric. Right? Indehiscence means that we know that some fruits that can fall after it become mature, but cocoa not. Right? So you have to pluck or harvest, all right, manually from the trees. Yeah. Now let's open the pots. Now you can see the beans, right? The outer part we call as husk, and it contains this almost carbohydrates here, lots of cellulose, right? Fiber and lignin, right? A few protein and pectins. Pectin is like a gum that binds cells and tissues in plants. All right, so you can see there's a lot of carbohydrates and it's a lot of gums in terms of gums. When we open the cocoa pot, the husk, you can feel that there's a lot of gums there. And then you can see the seeds. This is the seeds covered in a mucilaginous pulp. Right, there's a pulp. You can eat that, right? No, you can try it, and then it feels like sweet and sour. All right. So it contains the pulp itself. It contains water, lots of water, and sugar and other compounds. You cannot imagine pulp. You can imagine rambutan, right? If you open rambutan, you see the white flesh on the outer side. That is the pulp. So in cocoa, so this is the pulp, the white one. It's very important. Remember the water and sugar here because it's going to help in understanding the explanation. Uh, all right, so that is, we open it, you can see there's well, sclerotic layer like tempurung here, and then placenta. This is an important parts of plants whereby it will supply nutrients to each of the beans there. All right, so these are the seeds of cocoa. So cocoa flavor coming cocoa from here, chocolate originated from here. So it contains fat, which is cocoa butter, 50%, and a lots of phenolic compounds, all right, and some protein and also some carbohydrate. You can see the purplish; those are the phenolic compounds that contribute to the flavor. I mean, sorry, to contribute to the colors, right? I put here cacao seed recalcitrant. It means that this is in many seeds of plants from tropics, whereby the seeds you cannot keep it dry, right? Like paddy, right? Or rice. We harvest and we can keep it dry, and still after some times you can plant and it can grow, but not like many other tropical plants like cocoa. After you eat, you have the seeds, right? You cannot dry it; they will just no, they will just die, and then you have to plant it immediately. All right. So a little bit of ulang kaji. All right. So before we further explain, all right. So this is a central dogma of genetic, means that the manual for every organisms, all the manuals that for organism to make an organism lies on the DNA, Right? Ini macam buku lah, right? So to manual macam mana buat kereta, macam mana buat pokok koko dan sebagainya, all in DNA. Alright. So then let me use laser pointer, right? And then DNA will be transcript and translate into proteins. All right. So these are the molecules that are working in the cell. Most of the molecular works are being done by proteins, and that will contribute to the traits that we can see, right? For example, pokok yang daun lebar, like that, all right? Biji buah yang besar, warna pot, dan sebagainya. All those are traits, things that we can see, are all embedded. The information are embedded in DNA, all right? But traits are okay. The traits that we see are mostly influenced as well by environments. All right, even though they have same DNA, but if the persons of the plants are planted in different environments, all right, they will sometimes show different traits because some traits are really affected by environment. All right, being knowing that, right, there are three types of cocoa. We can classify it based on their morphology, rupa bentuk ya. So we have Criollo, Forastero, and Trinitario. All right. So Criollo, you can see they are very long like this, very rough surface with a uh, very clear furrow here where you can see that allure, right? Things. All right. Okay. So Criollo is a high quality cocoa type of cocoa, right? And they have this white plum beans, and they are known for giving a fine or flavor taste, right? But in terms of production, they are not that very good. But for Astero here, you can see that they are high yielding. They are very disease tolerant, not like Criollo. But in terms of quality of flavor, well, they are so like that, all right? And the beans are like flat, right? Not like Criollo, right? And many of the countries here, 95% of cocoa around the world are from Forastero. Trinitario is just a hybrid of Criollo and Forastero. Yep. Okay. Okay. So now that is based on what we call as morphology, rupa bentuk. Kalau rupa bentuk, we can divide into three categories. But based on DNA, cocoa can be separated or categorized into 10, right? Okay. So why do we need all this category? Because we need them so we can classify them, we can understand the characteristic. Later on, if we want to create a new type of cocoa plants, we can choose from this category. Let's say you want to have a high yielding plants, and yet the flavor is not that very good. But then you have from another category whereby they have a good flavor but not a good yield. So we can do breeding, right, or crossing, so we can produce a hybrid whereby they have the two types of the desired traits, right? So in Malaysia, we are collecting around 2,263 accessions, is that types of cocoa, right, in a germplasm. It's just like a bank, right? A bank of plants. So in Malaysia, we have this amount, and we are the fourth largest in the world in terms of numbers of type of cocoa that we have. So you can see that different types of cocoa here with the name, they have names, yeah. This is called Laffy 7, right? They have some KKM22, right? Some MCBs. These names indicated sometimes the origins of cocoa or a company or institute that produce them. For example, KKM is called Clone Cocoa Mardi. MCV is Malaysian Cocoa Board. Queen Hill, QH is from Queen Hill in Tawau. So the one that I mark blue here are the clones that we call as Malaysian Class 1 Cocoa, right? Right. So Malaysian Class 1 Cocoa is a elite clones. I will show later on. So what do we say is that what is a good clone or variety of cocoa? All right, so they must produce 2 tons per hectare per year of dried cocoa beans. All right, so single bean they must have 1 gram and above. Pot index means that to produce 1 kilogram of dried beans, at least pot index is 25. All right, okay. Bean number per pot more than 30. Of course, you want to have the bean that have less kulit. You need the inside, the nib is the important part of cocoa where you can get the butter and as well flavors from there. So, right, you want to have high cocoa butter. We want to have more than 50% cocoa butter in one seed. Of course, we would like to have plants that can ward off diseases and can withstand insect pests. We don't want our plants that we need to manage every single day that will increase cost in terms of farming, right? So this is Malaysian class 1 cocoa clones. They are agronomically right superior, means that they have high yield, they have a low pot index, means that you only require less number of pods to produce 1 kilos of cocoa dried bean, 1 kilo of dried beans, right? And single dried bean weight is high. Bean number per pod is also high, and they are very resistant, for example, for PST. So these are 5 Malaysian class 1 cocoa clones that recommended to the farmers throughout Malaysia because they can be, well, suitable to be planted in anywhere in Malaysia. Of course, we have class 2 and class 3 and so on. All right. So how do we propagate cocoa? All right. So we can propagate using beans, and also we can propagate by using graftings. All right. So we can see here that for grafting, you need a scion or stems from a branch, young branch from any cocoa variety that you like, and then you combine with a rootstocks there. All right. And then after that, if these scions develop and produce leaves, and then you can cut that off, that leave only the scions, right? All right, so grafting also can be done in mature trees like this, right? Sometimes we have old cocoa, all right? Sayang kita mau tebang semua dan tanam baru, but you can still use the root system. Root system is very important because the root system will absorb all the nutrients from soil. So we want that system, but we only need to add new shoots on the top. So we can use grafting, all right? For mature trees. These are seeds that just emerge. All right. If you learn in science, there are two ways of two modes of germination, either epigels or hypogel. So this is epigel. You can see that the cotyledon, this is cotyledon, right? Been rise up from the soil, and then they open and then come out a new flush of leaves. All right. So sometimes if you don't, well, usually you can plant the seeds directly to the soils, but you can plant as well on pots and you put under nurseries, right? The advantage of nurseries is that you can screen out. Number one, you can take care of the plant first, right? The seed is like a baby. You plant it in the soils, it's open environments where lots of like insect like to eat, and then lots of pests that like to use the nutrients. You put in nursery first, you take care of them first, and then they become and then it's a bit stronger. Then we transplant into the soil. So that is nursery. So you can see in nurseries we shade the cocos, right, with around 70% of sunlight. Because remember, cocoa is 100-story trees. They like shades, right? So these are examples of trees that derive from seeds, right? You can see the characteristics there because this is a trees, like trees that you can see outside. They can go tall until 10 to 15 meters. So you can see that they have this characteristics, special characteristics, right? And you can see a joket. Okay, that part looks like hands, right? Fingers like that. That's a front branches. All right. So these are characteristic of cacao trees that if you plant from seeds. But if you plant, means that if you do grafting, you can see that the plants are a bit shorter and you can see the branches at the lower part here. This is an example of cocoa plants. You can see that they are planted in a row. They have planting distance, usually around 3 meters. Planting distance is important so that your plants, number one, because you want to have a uniforms, all right, farms. Uniform means that if you have if your farms are uniform, easier for you to manage, easier for you to give fertilizers, and that will just reduce costs. But importantly, a good planting distance also will increase your farm income as well. All right, and as well. For the plants not to fight to each other for nutrients, right? If they're so close, perhaps they have some competitions, right? So that's the cocoa farms, right? And you can see here, this is quite mature one. You don't see the in early stage of cocoa farms. Usually we will have our shade trees, for example, gliricidia or sometimes bananas. Cacao also can also good to be planted, integrated with other fruits, for example, durian, something like that. All right. So that will increase the economies of your farm. You have cocoa and as well as fruits. So this is cacao trees. You can see that um, the flowers grows everywhere from branches to the stem. It's everywhere. So this we call as cauliflowers, right? And then the flowers like several thousand flowers in a year for one trees, but all of them won't be a fruit or won't become pods. Okay, there are some limitations whereby usually around 5% of total flower that from a tree that can bear fruits. Yeah. Right, so that's the flower of the cacao. All right, allogamous means that we know that flower is the sexual reproductive organs for plants. So your pod come from here. So they need to be pollinated, right? A pollen need to come, right? A male pollen need to come to the females. Here, styles, all right? That's the pollen here, covered by petal, right? That's the female. But the allogamous flower, they don't like pollen from the same flower from the same tree. They like from other trees or other varieties. So they like outcrossing. So they can produce different types. So the seeds that produce will be different. All right, not not very much with the mothers. All right, so they will produce or my fathers. So they will produce hybrids. All right, entomophilous means that the flowers of cocoa been pollinated preferably by insects. All right, so you can see that the pollen is covered by petal. How can that pollens can go to the female parts here? So insects is very important, so they can bring the pollens to the female parts. Yeah. All right. So this is one examples of pollinators for cocoa flower. It is a tiny flies in a family of Phociponia, right? Okay. So cacao have produced a lot of leaves. Can see that different maturity of the leaves give different type of colors. All right, early stage of cacao leaves will colored in red, and then as they mature, they will turn green. Right, semi-deciduous means that sometimes they shed leaves, right? The leaves just die and fall, right? That is meant by semi-deciduous, right? And then for a good management of cocoa farm, we have to prune our trees like our hair, can? If we leave just our hair, it will just become longer. Well, nothing wrong with that, but sometimes you feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it also brings insects to come, right? But same as plant as well. So you can leave the. Some people think that well, the more leaves means that that is better, but not necessarily. If you have more leaves, means that sometimes the humidity in the plants increase. This will invite some pathogens or become a shelter for insects. So we don't want this. So cacao the cocoa tree need to be pruned occasionally. Well, sometimes 6 times, right? So by prunings, more sunlight can come, all right? So that a bit reduce the humidity, so that we can also prevent from we are giving home for pathogens and as well as insects. And as well, we provide because we fertilize our plants, right? We give baja, right? And then by pruning, so the nutrient can be distributed efficiently to a needed branches or productive branches. Just to give you some ideas. So do have cacao have problem when we cultivate in Malaysia? Yes. There is an enemy. If you can look closely, that's the tiny insects that we call as cocoa pod borer, and that's the egg of cocoa pod borer. Yeah, and on top they lay their egg on pots. It's very difficult for you to see. Well, cocoa pod borer or Conomorpha cramera. This is the um, pest, insect pest, number one in Malaysia, right? And that's the life cycles. The most devastating life cycle is during the larva. The adult will lay egg on top of pods. They will hatch and live around 2 weeks and cause havoc and by eating the pulp inside here. All right. So what happened when cocoa bean infested? As you can see that that's the frass and then the leftover after the insects eat. And importantly, the beans of cocoa will become clump and they have a um, uh, low cocoa butter contents and of course the flavor as well. So this will reduce the price of cocoa. So it's very devastating. If we don't control, it can wipe up the whole farms. So if you have opportunities to go to cocoa farm, sometimes you can see the pods have these whitish insects, right? These white insects, right? This is a good insects, right? So it invites the black uh, what we call as black ants, right? So black ants can help to prevent cocoa pod borer to come and lay egg on the pods. All right. So the white insect we call as mealybug. The black ant like them because they produce like a juice on top of the bag because they suck some juice from cocoa pods. Right. Well, that is not pretty much damaging. Right. They produce some sugary juice on their back, and then this black cocoa ants will consume that and also give some preventions if cocoa pod borer comes and wants to lay egg, they see cocoa black ant, they just will run away. Or sometimes we can see that cocoa pod being covered by plastics. All right, so that is one of the prevention measures. Of course, we have other methods to prevent cocoa pods. Right, we have some disease as well, black pot disease, and also vascular streak dieback. But this is well pretty much is manageable. Yeah. All right. So after 5 to 6 months, depend on variety, we will harvest our pods. So we harvest in Malaysia, on other countries as well. Usually we have two main season. Well, cocoa can be harvested throughout the year, but we have two main seasons. Now we open the pods and then we remove the seeds, right? And remember that raw beans have no cocoa flavor, so we have to do what we call as post-harvest processing. Very important that we need to ferment, peram, all right, and also we need to roast, bakar. So these two things, if we don't do any of this, you will not get that much desired flavor, the cocoa flavor. Yeah. So after we remove the seeds, you left the pods. All right. So well, many people have the different ways of using the pods. Well, mostly we can make it compost. Okay, compost, so you can give back to the farms. All right, and some research as well found that if we extract compounds from cocoa pods, that they can be used in pharmaceutical products, like they can give you anti-wrinkle, skin whitening, and sunscreen effect. Well, this is research has been found by the Malaysian cocoa board. All right. So now we go for fermentations. This is the first stage of important step, whereby it need to be the idea, not the idea, the process will kill the bean slowly, okay, at the proper pH. So the flavor precursor will develop within the beans, right? So belum ada lagi rasa, baru flavor punya precursors that we develop during fermentation. No fermentation, you will have low cocoa flavor. So you will have rasa kelat, rasa pahit. Of course, color dia pun tidak cantik. And kalau kita terlebih fermentation, over fermentations, that will have as well produce low cocoa flavor. So we need to have an optimum time for fermentations. So fermentations can be done by using just you timbun-timbun by heap fermentation and covered by bananas. This is done in Africa, right? So you can use a small box as well, depends on the amount of your cocoa beans, right? So as well, if you go to a farm, huge farm, they use a facility like this whereby they will start pile your beans, start ferment here, and during fermentations, all right, you need to mix one times, all right, the beans usually around 3 days of fermentations. So how they do that, they will just open it and then they push the beans down here, right? And they start another fermentation. So fermentation is around like 5 to 6 days in Malaysia. Well, it depends on the variety, right? And afterward, when the fermentation finish, they just clean out. We will just want only the beans here, right? Okay, so this is the starting of fermentations. You can see the pulp. Okay, early fermentation is a bit whitish, but after when the fermentation finish, polyphenol will be converted into quinone by using by the activity of polyphenol oxidase. It's become brownish here. You can see it starts to have the color of cocoa. All right. So there's lots of biochemistry in cocoa fermentations. All right. First, the sugar. Right. Remember, fermentation is only happen in the pulp, not the beans. Right. So fermentation start in the pulp. So the pulp have sugars, and then microbe use the sugars to produce ethanols and lactic acids. All right. What are the microbes? Are the yeast and lactic acid bacteria. All right. So this ethanol produced by yeast later on will be used by acetic acid bacteria to produce acetic acids, and also will convert that into carbon dioxide and also water. All right, during fermentations, under the fermentation box, the fermentations juice will come out. Okay, the pulp kan dia jadi cair, dia jadi jatuh macam tu. Alright, so the temperature increase as well as the pH also increase, that will give a good condition. And lactic acid, they produce lactic acid and acetic acid, that will sip the temperature, and the organic acids will help in killing the beans. The beans will die, and then lactic acid dengan acetic acid masuk ke dalam beans, dan pada itulah pH akan turun. Daripada dalam bean, pH akan turun dan activate many chemistry that helping in development of cocoa flavor. The important part is that we have this storage proteins, right, in beans will be degraded into peptides and free amino acids. All right, so these are the cocoa flavor precursors by the activity of protease. Also, we have degradation of carbohydrate to reducing sugars. These reducing sugars and peptide and free amino acids will later on react under Maillard reactions and produce cocoa flavors. And also we have oxidation of polyphenols, whereby they will reduce the astringency. Okay, rasa kelat. Right. Okay, I will skip this. It's just that you need to have a good fermentations, means that when you ferment, and then the flavor derived from proteins, it needs to have ratio between peptides and free amino acids. If you know fermentation is not enough, you won't have much degradation, no flavor, bad flavor. But you over fermented as well, the protein will become become into a free amino, lots of free amino acids and short peptides, and this will result as well in bad flavor. Right? Now we finish our fermentations, we go to drying. All right. Drying is to reduce moisture contents. All right. Nampak tadi gambar, right? After fermentation masih basah-basah lagi. So we need to dry, right? So we need to dry because we don't want that we don't want as well, because when there's water, then there will be insect as well. There will be also microbe will come as well. But drying as well, if you over dry, okay, the beans will become lighter, and then sebab harga, the price of beans is depend on the weight of the beans. Kalau terlampau ringan, then petani nanti tak dapatlah keuntungan yang banyak. Kalau terlampau cepat juga, alright, di shell, okay, kulit luar bean itu jadi keras and will not helping, means that the organic acids won't dissipate, so it will cause off flavor. So you need a proper drying as well. All right. So usually, easiest one is sun drying, but in Malaysia, like our country, we have lots of rains, right? So sometimes we use plastic here to cover. All right. Usually, it takes 5 to 7 days to reduce the water percentage around 7%. All right. So this is another sun drying in a farm in Pahang. So you can see that if rain comes, if rain falls, so they just drag this movable, what we call this, shelters, so that can prevent the beans from get wet, right? Sometimes, of course, we have lots of rains. Artificial drying also can be done, whereby you give and then you bakar di bawah ni, and then they give you some heat. That heat helps in drying of the beans. But sometimes, because of the smoke goes into the beans, and it will, it disturb the flavor of the cocoa. All right. So here you are, fermented and dry cocoa beans, right? And it's a cocoa beans ready for market. Looks very nice, and they are usually packed in 25 kilogram of gani and ready to be marketed. So beans been evaluated. Okay. In Malaysia, we have the superior one, we call SMC1. So we can test the bean, we look at it, we cut it into half, we look whether it's fully fermented, partially purple, fully purple, or slaty. All right. So good one is fully fermented. All right. So the next step to produce, second important stage to produce cocoa flavor is roasting. Right. During roasting, chocolate aroma and flavor will completely develop. Right? What are the chemical reaction involves? Maillard reactions. That is important one, whereby peptides will react with sugars. Right? Right? Others like caramelization, lipid oxidation, of course, oxidative degradation of phenolic compounds. Right. So we look at. So that's the beans. Right? Beans after drying, it goes into breaker just to, so that the kulit of the beans is easy to be removed. Okay, and it goes into winnower that spread between the shells and the nibs dalam do, and the nib will be roasted. All right. Well, they have different settings, but in general, something like this. All right. So selepas roasting, it goes to grinding. They grind, right? Then you get your cocoa liquor, right? This cocoa liquor will be pressed to produce cocoa butter. And then the leftover is what we call as cocoa cake, and they grind that you become cocoa powder, right? So to produce chocolate, tadi kita kena ada liquor, alright, ada cocoa butter, and then we say have some sugars as well. Alright, so we need to combine them to make chocolates. Alright. So these are some chemicals that can be found in cocoa flavor, means that cocoa flavor is complex. All right. So how to make chocolate, right? So you need cocoa liquor, you add milk, you add sugars, and then you add cocoa butters under refiners to make it smooth, and then you do conching, right? You blend lama, sometimes 3 days to make the chocolate feels of creamy and velvety textures, right? Kemudian it goes to temperings. You increase the temperature and then slowly you reduce the temperatures so that the particle of cocoa dia tersusun dengan cantik. Alright? And after that, of course, you molding, depend on mold, you can make bars and so on, whichever form that you like. So this is how we make chocolates. Right? All right. So far, that is about from farm to chocolates. I will just go quickly because the time not permitted. I'm sorry. Just go quickly. What are the things now trend in cocoa? Yeah. So in Malaysia, right, the production of cocoa is reducing, but we can see the grinding is increasing. Okay, we are among top grinding. Grinding means that we buy beans and we grind, right, and produce semi products. All right. Well, this just shows that, well, many factors that contribute. If we talk about cocoa industries, right, people converting into more lucrative, what we call lucrative crops, right? But of course, as well, uh, cocoa industries is benefiting the countries by exporting mostly by semi-finished products. But as well, we also import lots of cocoa beans as well. All right. And we see that who are the planters, who are actually planting our cocoas. Okay. They are small farmers, right? 5,019 hectares, 85% of hectarage in Malaysia been planted by smallholders. And 55%, 53% of these people, our whole smallholders are in Sabah. All right. So here are the things. We usually sell our cocoa in bulk. Maksudnya, okay, kita tidak kisah quality, kita kumpul, and then we jual. Tetapi now, cocoa beans are separated into two categories. They can sell by bulk, or one they can call as fine or flavor. So this fine or flavor, they have unique taste. They are special. You cannot find in other countries. Only certain countries that produce, and they are produced in very small numbers. So we think that this is the only way that we can, one of the way that we can increase back the industry of cocoa in Malaysia. All right, so you can see that cocoa flavors is not the only cocoa flavor when you taste that cocoa, but they can have like various wonderful flavors. All right, from floral, spicy, woody, fruity, and so on. So there are lots of flavors. Right, and if you look some countries like the one that I show here that I get from the international cocoa organizations, you can see that most of them are from the, for example, Central Americas, and even our neighbor Vietnam. They are producing fine flavor. Means that the numbers of bean that they produce is not that high, but they have cocoa beans that is special and price high. That will help the farmers. All right. So there are lots of things that we can desire from a beans. Not only beans that we can make chocolate, but we want to have our beans. We have different aroma notes, different flavors. We would like to have, instead of coffee in the morning, we want to have chocolates. We want to have our chocolate that give up some when we drinks, new colors, and so on. All right. Okay, I skipped that one. All right. So these cocoa flavors are affected by genetics. Where do you grow and how do you farm and how do you process? Means that fermentations and how you roast and so on. So all these are affecting or influencing cocoa flavors. All right. So if we see that growing conditions and farming practice does give effect to cocoa flavors. So if the other countries can have their fine flavors, I'm sure that our Malaysia as well, with our diverse type of soils, with diverse type of places, all right, different, like say, even we have in Semenanjung and in Sabah and Sarawak. So now these we can have our own fine flavors or fine or flavor cocoa beans that can be appreciated and sold at high price. How's the difference? I just use these comparisons, all right? Let's say is that Bugs beans, if their price is 6 ringgit 50 cents, let's say you're producing like 1,500 or 1.5 ton per hectare per year. So estimate is around 9,000, well, 10,000 ringgit per year. But if we can produce fine flavor, you can see that the price is high. You look at that. This is estimates income 26,350 ringgit per year, right? So we are aiming for that. So in Malaysia, we have already several farms that has been awarded as fine and flavor cocoa beans, right? So this could be the new way on how we can improve cocoa industry in Malaysia. just to share some of our findings from our postgraduate students. This is from Mr. Boni, that remember the cocoa flavors can be affected by farming practices. So we use different type of organic compounds. Here you can see that if we use this is when you taste cocoa, they have different attributes of flavor, right? Sometimes you have bitter, astringent, sourness, and so on. Now look at sourness, kemasaman ya. Malaysia are known by being masam, but not nowadays. But because those days, some people are think that our being still masam. So if you use inorganic, you see, people perceive that as sour, right? But if you use organics, chicken menu, cow menu, okay, empty fruit bunch from oil palm, and cocoa pot husk itself, you can see it reduce the sourness. So means that this is a wonderful result from our students, that we can manipulate a bit, although the others we cannot. It seems that they don't have differences, but there's an opportunities for us to change the flavor attributes of cocoa by farming practice. And currently, this is one of my student, Norzulaiha, is doing a PhD. So we are doing micro fermentations. So we want to understand every single cocoa variety clones. Remember that we have that 2000 different variety of clones that we call. Each of these should have their own uniqueness. And the way that you can assess that by fermenting them individually. So this is one way that we are currently doing micro fermentation. So hopefully that we can decipher or unravel the unique flavor that coming from the each of the clones. So, all right, quite long. So take home lessons. Number one, cocoa supply chain is complex, right? You can see that from producing the seeds, from planting the seeds until the make of chocolates. It takes a long change. It involves many people. It involves many expertise. You need people that expert in food. You need people expert in agriculture, agronomy, genetics, chemistries, many, many more. All right. So it's complex. So every single bite that you eat, appreciate it, right? Especially for the farmers. And then the unique cocoa flavors. The flavor that you eat is unique. There's no other plants that can produce cocoa flavor as cocoa. It comes from complex biochemical and chemical reactions, mainly during fermentation and roasting, also influenced by genotype and environment. And finally, although the cocoa industries, all right, in terms of productions, we are insignificant by other countries, but we're still contributing, all right? And this is a new source of wealth that we're looking at, the specialty cocoa beans that will become our main products, inshallah. Right, with that, thank you very much. And I am looking forward for any questions. Thank you. Back to you, to our host. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Dr. Azwan. It was a very interesting and wonderful topic and very well presented today,
Thank you.
as well as its relevance with agriculture.
Yes,
Um,
right.
yes. We invite for some questions to be answered by our guest speaker today that were sent to us during the presentation.
Right.
So the first question is, wait, the doctor.
Yeah, sure, no problem. They might question that I cannot answer as well.
Yes. So, the first question is, between the four types of chocolate,
Yeah,
which one is, wait,
delicious, healthy.
which one that help in releasing stress?
Well, basically,
or is
chocolate.
it
Yeah. Well, in general, when you eat chocolate, whatever chocolate you eat, you will feel happy, right?
yes.
I don't think there's a people that when you eat chocolate you feel sad. All
Yes, yes,
right.
that's true.
So basically, in general, any chocolate can help you to release some tensions. That has been published in many papers, right? But if you talk about healthy, right? Well, chocolate is a healthy food. The problem is that the sugars that been added to the chocolate, right? Because you want rasa manis-manis, right? So that's why people put chocolate. Sometime in the olden days, whereby some beans, there some beans like Malaysian beans, they rasa masak. But the olden days, huh? So the producer put lots of chocolate just to mask the flavor, right? But it not happen nowadays. If you go for dark chocolate, that is known for good for health because you don't add that much sugars, right? No milk as well, right? So lots of polyphenols that can help and in antioxidant effect, right?
Yes, thank you, doctor. Another question is, um, what are the challenge that the new age cocoa farmers are facing? Since now is the pandemic, then what are the challenge for the farmers?
Challenges for farmers nowadays. Challenges, yeah. Number one, we can say that we need to increase the productivity, right? The current productivity is a bit reduced, right? But I'm sure that if the farmers follow the good practices in agronomy, they can increase that. We have still have problem a bit with pests, especially with the cocoa pod borer, right? That one is number one, right? But it's manageable if the farm is small, right? Smallholders, right? If the farm is small, then we can still manage. But the problem is that if the farm is huge and the current practice to control CPB is mostly like using cultural practice, that will be a bit laborious. All right. So, but during the pandemic, I still see some activities, mostly by there's a one farmers there are a few farmers as well that going into this what we call as fine and flavor chocolate. They are producing that kind of chocolate. For example, entrepreneur Mr. Ong Ning Gang from I think from Pahang. They get their cocoa from villages, all right, then produce a very good chocolate, and they're still means that good in business. And I saw as well, um, there was a Pelajar Sekolah Rendah, I think, that make his own chocolate. What do you call this company, right? That selling chocolate during this pandemic. I'm not sure. 11 years old, I think. It's from Sabah. It's very wonderful stories. Well, anyways, the way that we can see that if we cannot produce that much, so that's why we're aiming for a good qualities, right? If we ask people to plants, if the price is not that very attractive, but how we can make the price attractive is by increasing the quality, right? If you have a good quality of beans, that can help very much the farmers. So I am thinking, this is my personal my personal views, that maybe in the futures, all right, maybe we produce not that much beans, but the productions, maybe it comes from the farmer itself. Means that the farmer will produce beans from a small, well manageable farms, and they produce their own chocolate. All right, and that chocolate is different from any other places in Malaysia, perhaps. Right? For example, maybe
Yes, doctor.
Ranau chocolate is different from from chocolate maybe created from Pahang. So people will look from these special places. I guess so. Yeah.
Yes, doctor, I agree with that. And another question
Yeah.
from Noi Awang.
Yeah.
She asked where we can get the chocolate ruby. Is there any specific jenama chocolate ruby?
Oh yes, this Ruby, it's so unfortunate when it was announced in 2018. I think it was in Europe, and it was only produced in Japan under Kit Kat brand. Right? And I'm not sure if we can find it here. I don't see it around. I'm not sure if we go for maybe shops in Kuala Lumpur, maybe we can find. I'm not sure. But yeah, but in our normal market here, tidak, I don't see. Maybe because of the expensive price, perhaps. All right. Or they want to make it very unique, so they don't sell that much.
Yes, I think there's no in Sabah yet.
No, right? You cannot
Okay.
find, right?
Yes, we can. It's hard to find.
I also want to try it.
Last. Yes, doctor. Last question from Chung Zen Ten.
Uh-huh.
Hi, doctor. If you want to create one new species of cocoa to breeding, how long we need to achieve that, and what is the difficulty of for create better cocoa species?
Oh, cocoa species. I think variety lah. All right, we call it variety. Species is different. All right, so we want to create a new variety of cocoa. All right, conventionally, it takes 10 years for you to develop one new variety. Can you imagine that? So that's why sometimes some people, if we don't understand the science of it, maybe some complaints like why are there's no variety or why it is so late, because different plants have different growth, different ways on growing as well. It takes some long time, like macam oil palm kan, it takes long times for them to grow. So cocoa as well, to produce the first pod, it takes like 2.5 to 3 years, right, from beans to produce the pods. So if you want to create a new variety, usually it takes 10 years, right? However, if we know specifically what the traits and we know what the genetic codes or the DNA that responsible to the traits that we want, we perhaps can shorten, the selection. The selection is the thing that usually that takes time, right? Because when you do breedings, we need to understand that macam kita, right? Kita tengok adik-beradik kita, right? Macam serupa tapi tidak sama, right? So same as well as plants. When they have produced their seeds, you plant, they look the same, but not necessarily, right? So when we combine let's say we have two desired traits together, and then anak yang dihasilkan tu tidak semestinya akan dapat dua-dua sifat ibu bapa tu. There will be different degree of expression of the traits that you need to select. That is the important part. That's the challenges basically. But if you with the modern technologies, for example, with the molecular biology, molecular markers, we have high-end gene sequencing techniques. So probably that process can be shortened, right?
Yes, doctor. So we have another more
Sure,
questions.
sure.
From Ryan Murphy, he asked where we can find cocoa farm in Sabah, and from Joseph Ting, what's the difference between cocoa and cacao?
Right.
CAO.
All right. Okay. All right. Where you can find cacao farms. All right. Nowadays, kalau di Sabah, tempat paling banyak dulu, okay, Tawau paling banyak. So sekarang nih tempat paling banyak adalah di Ranau, right? So you can find from Ranau, right? Boleh pergi Ranau, ada di situ cocoa farm. Of course, some places ada yang kecil-kecil, tu adalah, right? Somewhere di Pantai Barat as well. Okay, so you can go there as well. Ataupun, okay, kalau tinggal di KK, you can go to the Pusat Penyelidikan Bioteknologi Koko in Spanggar. So dia ada di situ Coco Farm. So you can go and visit. Alright? Alright. So what the difference between cocoa and cacao? Alright. I have been explained before. Biasanya kita gunakan cocoa, right? Even our institutions that responsible for cocoa, Malaysian Cocoa Board, right? They use cocoa. They don't use Malaysian Cacao Board. Alright. Usually we use cacao, general, semua boleh pakai. But some people, some experts, they use cacao for raw material. Contohnya pokok, ataupun biji yang belum kena ferment, tetapi selepas dia kena ferment dan produk seterusnya disebut koko. Right? Dan juga perisa koko tu ialah perisa koko sebab perisa koko tu terhasil selepas fermentation dan roasting dan sebagainya. Alright, so I hope that explain.
Alright. For the next question
Yep.
is, what's the difference in quality between Malaysia and Belgium cocoa? And I think this is the last second questions. From Shirley, macam mana mau tahu kalau tu pokok koko sudah ngam sama persekitaran dia? Or maybe dia mau tanam dekat area rumah.
Sure. That will be wonderful. All right. Now, this is very interesting questions, and I would like to tell everybody is that Belgium has not own chocolate. They don't have their own cocoa. All right. They are countries that producing chocolate. All right. So, dari mana Belgium dapat coklatnya? Daripada semerata dunia. Dia ambil daripada, contohnya daripada Ghana. Ghana is the number one in term of cocoa flavor. Right? Perisa cocoa flavor number one. Alright. Cote d'Ivoire tadi adalah negara yang paling banyak menghasilkan buah koko. Right. So, producer coklat ni, dia hasilkan coklat dia kan. Memang kita tahu Belgian chocolate is wonderful. Right? There's no doubt about it. Swiss cocoa as well, chocolate as well. But to make the chocolate, they blend the chocolate. They not just produce from one type of cocoa. Maybe they have, because this is they keep it a secret, right? So they ambil cocoa daripada satu tempat with different ratios. So they hasilkan that the unique chocolate and they produce. Right? That's the number one. So Malaysian chocolate yang kita produce yang ada sekarang, okay, of course kalau kita rujuk tadi, Belgium dia tidak ada koko, tapi dia adalah negara yang menghasilkan coklat. Right? Coklat kita juga tidak kurang sama lah. Of course, if you talk about that, they have their own criteria, right? Of course mahal. Tapi coklat kita juga tidak, what do you call this? Tidak juga boleh kita kan kalah lah, alright? If you have opportunities, like say visiting Malaysian cocoa board, right? If you go visit, they will have like some sample of chocolate that made 100% by Malaysian cocoa. You try it and you let me know. All right? Please go and visit them. As well, sudah banyak producer coklat di Malaysia juga menghasilkan coklat-coklat yang baik. Walau bagaimanapun yang kita sebut tadi itu, they have their own standard as well. Right? Okay. The last one, macam mana kita tahu pokok koko kita itu sesuai ditanam di tempat yang kita ada lah. Alright. To see this, you need to look at how the plant grows. Alright. So if you see the plants, you know when the plants are happy. Alright. You see the growing, dia punya growth tu baik. Alright. Daun dia hijau, tidaklah kuning, alright. And then after some time, perhaps kalau tanam daripada biji koko, selepas 2 tahun setengah, 3, dia mula berbunga. Well, that is one of indicator that the plants are growing happily. Right? Of course, there are many ways that we need to assess. Of course, kita tidak tahu lagi dia punya flavor dan sebagainya. Tetapi generally, we look at the plants and you will know whether the plants are happy or they are suffering from nutrient deficiency or the environment that giving them stress. All right? I hope that helps.
All right, thank you. Yes, thank you, Doctor. I think that's all for our Q&A session. We hope you all enjoyed this amazing and interesting presentation by our wonderful speaker today. The link for registration and e-certificate is now being shared for the school students and UMS students. Please fill in your details and answer the simple feedback questionnaire. All students will receive e-certificate and SDP point for UMS students only. Thank you very much to Dr. Azwan for the explanation, and thank you to all of the participants who are joining this webinar and actively asking questions just now. So before we finish this session, I'll give a brief summary of what we learned about the 4 types of chocolate and the various types of cocoa seed and the processes involved in producing cocoa flavor, such as fermentation, drying, and roasting. Right, Doctor?
Yep.
And we also learned about chocolate production. Also, thanks to Doctor, we got to see the cocoa farm thanks to this virtual webinar also. And if you enjoy chocolate as much as I do, I believe we should begin growing cocoa at home, whether it is PKP or not. Do you agree with me, Doctor?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you again, Doctor, for answering those questions. And thank you also to all the audience today for your participation. We look forward to seeing you in the next STEM speaker series scheduled on 26th August, which is tomorrow. It was a pleasure to have all of you with us. With this, we conclude this webinar. Thank you and see you again.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Stay safe.
you.
Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera.
Waalaikumsalam.